Kogo's updated San Diego weather, partly cloudy near the coast, mostly sunny for the eastern half of the county. Below 70 at the beach today, below 80 inland, 74 to 85 in the valleys, might get to 90 in the lower mountains. Same kind of conditions and temps tomorrow, and the marine layer should be with us for most of the week. Right now downtown, 70. I'm Michael Clark. Next update at 1:30 on San Diego's breaking news station, News Radio 600 Kogo.
From the Honda dealers of San Diego County Traffic Center, incident South 15 near Poway Road. Apparently there's oil which has dribbled into the two right lanes off to the shoulder too. A traffic break may be coming soon, so a sand truck an attempt to clean up the situation. I'm Mark Zegan, your next Kogo traffic update just ahead at 1:16.
Hey, it's LaDona on News Radio 600 Kogo on iHeartRadio at Kogo.com. How do you deal with mass shootings? How do you deal with school shootings? How do you try to figure out why somebody crosses that line? Because, you know, we've all been angry. We've all had, well, I guess maybe I should just speak for myself. I've had revenge fantasies, and they're nothing more than that. It's just a revenge fantasy because somebody cut me off in traffic or because somebody broke up with me and, well, I was the best thing that ever happened to him, darn it. And then I get over my fantasies and I move on with my life because I would never, ever hurt another human being under those circumstances. Most of us cannot even imagine crossing that line into, let's say, Betty Broderick territory, where you're so enraged at your ex, you go into his bedroom with his new sleeping wife and mow them both down. We cannot understand how somebody could walk into a school in Connecticut and shoot a bunch of little kids who have never done anything to anybody outside of perhaps some hair pulling. I mean, that's about as extensive as it gets when you're at that age. And we cannot figure out how it is that, you know, today we wake up to the news that one student was killed at the hands of a shooter at a high school near Portland, Oregon. So we look for these answers, and we have such a tough time trying to separate the fact from the fiction, and where do you assign blame, and how do you try to predict when this sort of thing will happen, and who do you know is going to go off and try to shoot and kill a couple of cops who are eating pizza, minding their own business because you've decided that they're jackbooted thugs and Nazis. And none of us can really get into that place in our head because we're not those people. We don't have those tendencies. So looking for answers is frustrating. And in some cases, you know, you can blame mental illness. In some cases, you just can't. And in some places, the media gets blamed for it. Dr. Anthony Napoleon is here in studio with us, and he is a forensic psychologist, and he's taken a very close look at these shootings and can at least provide some answers. I don't know if, do you, I mean, at least a few?
If I may, before I begin, you mentioned the Betty Broderick case.
Right.
That has a personal meaning to me because I was working with Dan Broderick on a trial at the time that occurred.
Oh.
And I was a young forensic psychologist and warned Dan that I saw certain behaviors in Betty at the time. She had broken into his office while I was there with Dan, and she exhibited any number of behaviors that troubled me. So I wrote him a note, and I cautioned him. As I was saying earlier to you off air, these events are very touching to me for personal reasons.
Right.
Also, I try to look at it as a scientist looks at it, and we say in science that all things are patterns, and if we can discern patterns, then we can better predict. So I can go through the patterns that we know. There is a known constellation. I developed this constellation. It's called the Deselected Male Syndrome, and it accounts for over 95% of these shootings. And I can go through the ingredients. Keep in mind, however, LaDona, that none of them are sufficient in and of themselves, and they have to interact with one another. Also, if any listeners happen to have any of these characteristics, it does not therefore mean that they are predisposed to engage in these kinds of acts. So the first thing is there is always a neuropsychological issue. There is a mental illness. It can span from a thought disorder like schizophrenia to what we would call an axis 2 personality disorder,
Right.
typically along the narcissistic borderline continuum. However, there is one common denominator in all of these killers, these especially spree killers. They lack compassion and empathy for others. In other words, they can't feel for you or with you.
So
and that,
a type of sociopathy?
No. Sociopathy is a difference in kind, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But imagine that their tissue itself, I describe them as thermometers that can only take their own temperature. They cannot take the ambient room's temperature. So they don't ever really know exactly how you feel, so they act as if when they interact with you. The second factor is they have a certain cognitive organization. I describe their minds as similar to a hoarder's mind. If you watch these reality TV shows, hoarders, they have candy wrappers from 1980 that they've kept. So these people are very easily slighted. They ruminate, they perseverate on the insults of every given day. In the promo, in lead up to this segment, you said, well, you know, we all feel slighted, we all have anger. That's exactly right. But like a pressure cooker or a teapot, you know, that cute little sound that a teapot makes is functional, because if it didn't have that sound, it would blow up right on your stove. These people have no way of blowing off the steam. The third factor is particularly interesting to a lot of people, and I think you'll find it interesting because it's ubiquitous and it has to do with the culture. Because of digital media, we can now reach everyone. It's as though the media entertainment complex is an IV, and it's on push, and we're all getting that liquid injected into us. And since the late 1960s, there has been a social engineering effort to engineer artificially high self-esteem. Now, I'm not talking about confidence. I'm not talking about giving kids a feeling of competency. You know, if you work hard, you can be something. I'm talking about you are fabulous. You are wonderful. You are God's gift to the world.
You're brilliant.
And you're going to be a genius, and you're going to be Steve Jobs, Alex Rodriguez, LeBron James. And in addition to that, there is this promotion, the social engineers, again, they promoted victimhood, because if you're naturally fabulous, you're wonderful, everyone is a nascent genius. If you don't turn out to be the CEO or Steve Jobs, then what happened? You're a victim. You're a victim of the environment. So every one of these spree shooters feels as though he is a victim. Now, by the way, of course, obviously, not everyone who is inculcated with artificially high self-esteem or victimhood goes out and commits a spree shooting, which is what I said at the beginning.
Right.
However, on the other end of the continuum, looking at those two social engineering factors, we have a lot of misery. We have a lot of sadness. This is one of the reasons why psychotropic medications are so popular. We are all walking around with an existential misery, especially millennials on, because you can't mosey into work on Monday in flip-flops and be the CEO by Friday. Not everybody is LeBron James. But these individuals, because of the errors in their own neurology, put in this environment, build up this rage. The fourth factor is very fascinating. It has to do with the deselected male syndrome. If they're young and full of testosterone, they target young, beautiful women, or in addition to males who are popular, the handsome boys. So when I saw Elliot Rodger and I saw the first interview with the attractive blonde woman who reported that she had been targeted and one bullet missed, and he he continued to pursue her. And then if you heard Elliot talk, he talked about the fact that these young, beautiful women, they didn't want anything to do with him. This gets back to the issue of sociopathy, because women universally deselect these men that I'm describing. In study after study, women will say, and by the way, women have a sixth sense about this. They'll say, you know, he's a little bit creepy. There's something a little bit off. So they deselect them. Organizations deselect them. These guys are the guys in the office that give everybody the willies. Creeps. But
right.
The sociopath is charming. They're intelligent. They're garrulous. And women fall for that. And I've written about that and talked about that, that the sociopath is really the person that you know who is a danger to you. These individuals target you because you are popular, or because you are young and beautiful, or because you represent a symbol of their victimhood. It could be the courthouse. It could be police officers, and nobody wants them. If you look at this Miller couple, you know, they're described as white supremacists. Until you look closer at that doesn't hold water. They went to an Indiana group of white supremacists, and they were deselected. The white supremacists didn't want anything to do with them. They went to the Clive and Bundy protest.
Right.
And the Bundys didn't want anything to do with them. This is the pattern. They are deselected by young, beautiful women and by organizations. And remember, they can't blow off the steam, so it builds and builds and builds. We've had 74 of these spree killings since 2012. And we are at this point in our society, because genetics don't change. The incidence of neuropathology has remained the same, but the culture is creating these monsters with a degree of regularity that troubles me.
Well, I would think that it would. I think it troubles everybody because like I said, we look for answers and we, cast about, and we just can't seem to quite pin it down. And yet with the couple that you were talking about who were rejected by the Clive and Bundy people, I mean, they were letting off, they were giving indications of what they were going to do.
Yes.
And, we've heard this a couple of times where, wow, they really did it. Right. So they had told somebody they were going to do it, right. And yet we still couldn't get that information.
That's because, well, it's fascinating, and it's a great observation on your part. We human beings tend to normalize and rationalize behavior because it's inconceivable and it's too hard for us to get our mind around the fact that there are people like this. Also, what we define as well-adjusted in this society. I also worked on a case, the Craig Peyer case.
Oh, yes.
Craig, the very next day after he killed Kara Ann Knott, did a piece on Channel 10 News where he was taking a reporter on a ride-along, and if you look closely at that, if you have that tape, it's very fascinating. You see her death scratches on his face. And they interviewed his neighbors. It's always the same thing. He's such a nice guy. He was quiet.
Right.
They talked about Elliot Rodger. The deli person, oh, he's such a nice guy, so polite, so wonderful. Mr. Ibarra, why, he was quiet. Let me tell you something about normal. Normal is getting agitated. Normal is, if I listen to your show, LaDona, and normal is you expressing emotion and getting agitated at times, that's normal, that's healthy. If you were, and I'm not going to name any names, but let me imitate it. Yes, we're here today, and we're going to talk to Dr. Anthony Napoleon. Yes, we're all feeling so... Yeah, that bothers me. That NPR vibe bothers me. It is not normal to go around like that. I expect normal people to come into the deli and someday, hey, how you doing? Hey, I just don't feel good today. Oh, for God's sakes, you wouldn't believe what happened in traffic.
Right.
If you come in and you're constantly like this, and this is monotomatic.
Maybe that's what makes people so nervous, though.
And by the way, women pick that up very, very, very effectively. They are brilliant at it. Men, they don't seem to have that sixth sense. But women, that's why women deselect them. Beautiful women, by the way, are very selective anyway, until they get older and they realize that the cad jilts them and they have a life of misery. So then they say, well, I'm 40 years old. I've slept with all the bad boys. Now I'm going to find a good guy. The good guys are rich, don't want anything to do with them. So, we really do it to ourselves. But we understand this, and it is important to take a look at the things we can change. We can't change genetics. Some of us are born very sympathetic and empathetic with other people. Some of us are cold.
Yeah.
We can't change that. You come onto this planet with these tendencies. However, culture. We've got to stop socially engineering victimhood, and we've got to stop socially engineering artificially high self-esteem.
I'm going to stop you right there because I've got to check in on traffic with Mark Zegan, and we'll talk to Dr. Anthony Napoleon a little bit more about these mass shootings and some of the things that perhaps we've done that have helped create monsters. First, though, Mark Zegan with traffic.
Hey, LaDona, we're moving along very well on the freeways. The break should be starting soon, though, on that southbound 15 near Mercy Road. There's an oil spill in the right lane there, the slow lane, so they want to throw some sand on that. Should happen anytime. I'm Mark Zegan. This from the Honda dealers of San Diego County Traffic Center. Our next Kogo traffic update is just ahead at 1:26.
Dr. Anthony Napoleon is here in studio with us, and we're talking to him about these mass shootings and how is it that we are, if we are, creating these people who seem to be cut off from not just emotion, but they're cut off from other people. And, you were just saying that women are really good at picking it up. I wonder if that doesn't have something to do with just, basic genetics in that, we're smaller and it's much easier to hurt us. And if we see somebody that makes us uneasy, we try to get away from them.
Absolutely. You are quoting from the work of E.O. Wilson, a sociobiologist who identifies much of our behaviors as rooted in our sociobiology. Absolutely. Women who did not have that sixth sense did not survive to reproduce and pass on their genes. Men, on the other hand, they have the privilege of being somewhat insensitive to this because they can assert their dominance, their physical prowess. So they don't necessarily have to sense anything. But women are exquisitely sensitive to this. Also, this idea of creating artificially high self-esteem promotes something called entitlement. It's not just that, Anthony, if you work hard and you keep your nose clean and you keep your nose to the grindstone, you're going to be something one day. It's not that. Anthony, you're entitled to be great. You're going to be wonderful. You are fabulous. Now, a lot of writers will look at this and blame, of all people, Fred Rogers. He had a part in this. Fred, everybody was special, but he never identified why exactly are you so special. Kids hear this specialness, and it goes to their head. They translate it into, I am God's gift. I am entitled. I am entitled. Employers tell me and complain to me all the time about their millennial employees. And, I've got to schedule my work around my yoga classes. Really? And, I'm going to spend all this money on my school loans, and I'm going to do, because, I'm just destined to be fabulous. Where did they get this idea? It's a feel-good social engineering that everybody seemed to get on board with. And when you're entitled, Shakespeare reminded us, all misery comes from expectation. I did a medical psychology fellowship in plastic surgery associated with Scripps Hospital. And I've written in the Annals of Plastic Surgery on the best predictors of satisfaction with a cosmetic surgery procedure. The best predictor is your expectation. If you go in thinking that I'm looking for an improvement, I want people to say, you know what, LaDona, you look rested. Or what did you do to yourself? That's going to be positive. But if you say, you know what, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to be the new Scarlett Johansson and I'm going to leave my radio job and I'm going to be the #1 star because of this surgery, everybody is destined to be dissatisfied, including the surgeon. We've created this with a ruthless efficiency. And the victimhood, think about what the politicians do. They decide, they promote victimhood because if I promote in the populace that you are a victim. You are the victim of social injustice. Now, how do we see this, by the way? The 1% versus the 9%, the haves versus the have-nots.
Right.
It goes to the pathological brain as I am a victim. And since I'm fabulous and wonderful and I'm destined to be great.
The man is keeping me down.
If that's exactly right. If I'm not great, then my God, this unjust environment, how dare you? You have ruined me. And the politicians promise, vote for me and I'll restore social justice.
There you go. Dr. Anthony Napoleon with us in studio here on News Radio 600 Kogo, on iHeartRadio at Kogo.com. And trying to predict these types of mass shootings is difficult, but apparently it's not impossible because people show signs. I guess at this point, we just have to learn how to listen and look for those signs.
Well, professionals need to look at the signs and become better acquainted with them. Those of us, it's sort of like in New York City at this time. If you see something, say something. And also, please, just because someone is polite and speaks with that NPR vibe and they never change their vocal inflection, doesn't mean they're well-adjusted. It means they're troubled.
Oh, good, because I yell all the time, so I don't think anybody's got any worries about me.
I can tell you, I listen to your show, and you're very well adjusted.
Well, my mother would disagree. Dr. Napoleon, good talking to you. As we search for these answers, I think maybe, seeing something and saying something.